Hey everybody, this is John with 5 Idiots Talking Toys, and this is a special re-airing of our interview with Jim Swearingen. We thought we'd post it up, pin it up, and put it into one episode so everybody can watch it in its entirety. Some stuff will probably be cut out for length's sake, but you'll also notice there's some crazy differences. A lot has changed in the past year and a half, and hopefully we think for the better. But please enjoy this interview, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment, and follow us on rogue5toys.com. Come join us there if you want to purchase some Star Wars figures, or you can go to all of our links at 5idiotstalkingtoys.com. Anyway, enjoy this chat with Jim Swearingen, the Toy Father.
Hello and welcome to another episode of 5 Idiots Talking Toys. We are super excited tonight. We have our biggest episode yet, so thanks for tuning in. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel so that you can be notified of all future episodes, and you can watch our premiere every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can chat live with other viewers. I'm going to throw it over to John Walden. John, we have a super special guest that we're very excited to have tonight. Tell us all about it.
Absolutely. We are excited that someone very special has joined us tonight to talk about his influence on the Star Wars collecting community. It is the original designer of the Star Wars Kenner line is Mr. Jim Swearingen. Jim, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How's everybody doing?
Very good. Hey, Jim. How you doing?
Yeah, I just watched Rogue One and A New Hope yesterday. It was on TV back-to-back, which is perfect.
What did you think about Rogue One when it first came out, Jim? Because I have a lot of thoughts about Rogue One. What did you think when it first came out, tying into that storyline that you were so familiar with, 40 years ago?
Well, I tell people I love them all, some more than others, but the good thing, the best part of it was they managed to tie you, kind of explain A New Hope where it started. So it was like providing that link for people that didn't know any background. You could actually see it. So it was kind of the only thing about it that it's like it was a little bit like repeating A New Hope again. Boy meets girl, girl blows something up. It's like it's a little like A New Hope because you meet the girl first, and then she meets somebody, and and they blow something up. So, but that's part of the magic of all that stuff. But I like the being able to see where the plans came from, so that was kind of cool. And seeing back that way, I haven't seen all of them in exactly the right chronology, but seeing those two back to back was kind of like, oh, there ties things together. So.
The little bit of the repeat of those themes that you mentioned in the movie is a perfect metaphor for the toy industry right now, right? You walk up and down the aisles and it's just filled with retro toys. I feel like half of the toys you see there are really geared towards, us adults and parents to buy for our kids. It's a lot of repeating, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I find the toy aisle disappointing in that way, that there are not, and part of that is that there's so few people to sell to. You've got Target, Walmart, is there anybody
Amazon.
else to sell to? So, and online, well, Amazon.
Yeah.
But so the toy business is recycling an awful lot of stuff that, rehashing stuff, and there's very little that is new or innovative. I mean, you probably wouldn't do Stretch Armstrong again, or maybe even Easy Bake Oven. Who does baking anymore? So But it's
So,
so the toy business is real different than it used to be.
yeah. Let's go back 40 years, Jim. Where'd you start out? How'd you get into it?
Okay, going way back, when I was in high school, I was an arts kid. You know, I did sets for the class play. I worked on the yearbook. I was the art editor for the yearbook and took a lot of photography and stuff for it. So, but I had an art teacher that said, you know, if you want to make a living as a creative person, you might consider industrial design. So so I explored that, and I applied to Rhode Island School of Design, Pratt, and University of Cincinnati. I lived in Cleveland, and Cincinnati won out because they had the co-op program, which was when I was there, it was 5 weeks. We were in quarters, so 10 weeks of school, 10 weeks of working, and you got to experience the real design stuff. And my last couple of quarters of co-op were with Rainbow Crafts Toys in Norwood. And Rainbow Crafts was owned by General Mills, as was Kenner. When I was graduating, they had been rolled together, and I was 1A in the draft when I graduated from college, and my number was 61. And I had a big job with a really prestigious ID company. And when they found out my number was 61, they found somebody else. But my boss at Kenner, or my boss from Rainbow Crafts, was working at Kenner, and he said, I don't care what your number is, come and work for us. So I did. And then that was 1972, and that was when I started. And I worked on all kinds of Spirograph and Spirograph and Play-Doh and kind of preschool stuff. A couple of years later, Dave Okada joined Kenner, and they were forming the preliminary design department. And I was asked to be part of the preliminary design department, which was advanced concepts and licensing review kind of stuff. So we were charged with, it was roughly, 15 people, model makers, engineers, designers, soft goods people, and we were charged with coming up with new ideas, and along with that, we reviewed licenses. So I was on the team. As a team, we got together on $6 Million Man. That was our first licensed product, and big licensed product for boys' toys. And we got together and brainstormed how could we translate what we were seeing in TV into toys, and we all threw out ideas, and mine was the bionic eye.
Awesome.
One I claim.
I was going to ask you what your contribution was to that, because I remember that very specifically.
Well, yeah, we were and so it was presented concept-wise. We just got things. You'd mock something up, then we'd get a rough cost. Break it down cost-wise. Engineers, if you needed, you could get an engineer to tell you how you do things, like how do we raise his arm, so it looks like it's bionic and all. So we would just do a concept stuff. So the $6 Million Man was like presented as different parts of a G.I. Joe that were modified to, and I took a G.I. Joe's head and cut his eye out, and then carved a big hole in the back of his head and took a peephole from a door and shoved it into his head. And that's really how it was presented. Here's how we do this. And then when we turned it over to production design, they had to figure out how to make, a 1-inch focal point. You had about an inch of head. And when you looked in the back of it, you'd actually see something. They had to figure out the optics and all that stuff. I didn't have to worry about that. I just told them what I wanted, and then they had to figure it out. So, and that's the same thing with all the other stuff we were working on. But Star Wars was the big one.
So when you got the news about Star Wars, what did you think when they said there's this big space epic that someone has filmed, and we're thinking about doing a toy line for that?
Well, I was predestined because 1971 I saw THX 1138, which was George's first science fiction movie or post-apocalypse movie. I saw it when I was in college in 71. So I already knew George Lucas, kind of like, okay, I know George Lucas's work. Then he did American Graffiti, and he was now in the big time, he won some Academy Awards and stuff. And then November of 76, I was a Star Wars, I was a science fiction fan. So I read Starlog magazine. It came out in August of 76. In November, the second issue in November, there's a 4-paragraph write-up about Star Wars and Lucas doing the thing with 20th Century Fox. So I kind of knew about it. It's in the back of your brain. You read, Lucas is doing science fiction. That's pretty cool. And then I think the way it worked, my recollection, there are lots of people that think it was their idea, but the script was presented to Kenner at Toy Fair in 76 or 77. It's somebody, Lucas, Mark Pevers and somebody from 20th Century Fox made a presentation to probably Craig Stokely. He thinks it was his, and maybe Dave Okada. And I think they saw some live action photography because that was all done by February, pretty much. So they brought the script back to Cincinnati, and David brought it in and then said, does anybody want to read this script? And I was like, over here, this is the place that needs to go. So I took it home that night with a book of black and white stills from the live action, and then a snapshot of an X-Wing and a TIE fighter. Read it that night, and it was captured. It was like, this is it. We've got to do this. And at that time, it had been turned down. Everybody knows the story, but it had been turned down by everybody else, Mattel and Hasbro and Coleco and a whole bunch of other toy companies, Mego included, because they were the only people doing movie stuff. They did Planet of the Apes, but been turned down. So, and I read it and brought it back and gave it back to David and said, close your door for 2 hours and read this, because it's, we got to do this. So I was convinced from the moment. And because everybody else was, excuse me, worried about the 3 things that were wrong with it. It was a movie, and there hadn't been a movie that stayed in the movie theater no more than a few months, maybe 6. It was science fiction, and 20th Century Fox, Star Trek and Paramount Studios had screwed up licensing for science fiction because the crap that, it's okay. The crap that they put out with the Star Trek logo on it. And then the third thing was opening May, and that was a couple months away. And in the toy business, it took a year to get to production. It was just 50, if you wrote a schedule, it was 52 weeks if there was plastic involved. And so we wouldn't have product out until, even if the night I read the script, we had started the production for the thing, we wouldn't have product until February of 78. So it had doomed it with all the other toy companies because nobody thought they could hold out that long. And so we kept presenting it. We were convinced. The marketing people were like, well, it's kind of, it's fun and stuff, but look what's wrong with it. So we kept going, and luckily Bernie Loomis, who ran the company at the time, was smart enough to know that if the creative people think it's something, maybe we should let them go and do it. And since preliminary design didn't have to really worry about the profit line until much later, let's let them show us. So we kept showing stuff. I did first drawings and then renderings and stuff of the original stuff, the 12 figure or 11 figures. I didn't have 12, and X-wings and stuff. We did lots of boards and stuff. So they let us have our way with it. We kept coming back, and they, yeah. But it's, we can't have product till 78, and it's going to be in the movie and, in the theater. So the countdown was on, it's like, yeah, it's another week, shorter that, it's going to be. So we said, well, okay, well, we'll keep doing it. David and I made the first presentation to 20th Century Fox to convince them that we might do it. This little Midwest company. We did that in April. And
so Jim, was it just all hands on deck, for the pitch? I mean, I'm a graphic designer myself. I know what it's like to just get pulled out of your daily routine, and it's just, hours on end, get a pitch ready. Let's see if we can hook this client. Is basically what it came down to, I would assume.
Initially, no.
Okay.
Initially, it was just me and a couple other people working on stuff because it was more convincing. There was more convincing to do. So for the first, until my first trip is in April, we made a presentation in March of boards, basically graphic boards. We had a board of X-wing and TIE fighter, and the wings popped off the board, and the X-wing we designed it so that you could manipulate the board so that the wings open and stuff. And by then I don't know whether I may have already mocked up the first 11 figures, the ones that I used these guys with. Where's my camera? This is Darth Vader, who became a bad guy. And this is Princess Leia. She was in hers. So, but we made the first. Dave and I were the only ones that went out to California and made the first pitch to 20th Century Fox. So I got to meet Alan Ladd and Mark Pevers and those guys first, and then so we kept going. And the marketing people were talking to the marketing people at Lucas and 20th Century Fox, but nothing had been put on paper yet. And then April 4th was my trip to ILM, where I got to see stuff. I got to see an X-wing and TIE fighter, and the Millennium Falcon and the Death Star. That was all done. Excuse me for 1 second.
Okay.
A message popped up on my computer, but.
So the gears were turning when you got the script, weren't they? I bet you were up. The gears were turning when you got the script.
Oh yeah. And it was easy enough. Dave saw the same value, and my boss was a guy named Don England. We were, I did a lot of the first stuff just because there's other things going on in the department. So I did all the rendered stuff, and then once we started, the hard part about working on Star Wars at that point was we didn't have enough of an agreement, and they weren't prepared enough to provide me and other people with photographs and drawings, and all the stuff that they had done wasn't, in a form that would just, we'll just give you, here's what the X-wing looks like. So the first stuff was done without any help from Lucas, or much help from Lucasfilm. And then my trip to April was when I got to go through drawings and see models and all that stuff. So I was gathering all that stuff, and then things were kind of spreading out, and people were doing a lot of work on stuff. But the real all hands on deck didn't happen actually till May, when the movie was finally coming out. Because it was
now, Jim, I got a question for you. Who chose those 11 figures that came out in the beginning?
Me.
Why did you choose those?
I had better pictures of them. It's really simple. No, well, the core group was real obvious, because Luke, Leia, Obi-Wan, Sand People, R2-D2, C-3PO, Darth Vader. That's 10, right?
A Jawa.
Oh, and a Jawa.
The Jawa and then
Yeah, those are all pretty, because those are the first characters you see. So that was like, okay, those are the first. And the 12th one was done once we turned it over to production. And we didn't pick 11 for any particular reason. It's just those are the easiest ones to mock up, I guess. So it was really me. And then once we turned over the first 12, I wasn't doing any more after that. The first 11 figures, once we turned it over to production design, they could just say, let's do that guy or that guy. And they didn't need preliminary design to do that for until Boba Fett.
Okay, so I've got a question about the mythology. Was that really Dave Okada's sock, toe cut out of Dave Okada's sock for the Jawa cape?
Yes, it was his sock. It started as the character started out as a swimmer. It was a boy from a picnic group or something. It was actually built on adventure people. So, but yes, it's his sock. He took it upon himself to sew the sock.
So why did you guys choose the adventure people to mock up? I mean, was that for ratio?
Well,
had you already had in mind like vehicles and how these figures can fit in vehicles and things like that?
Yeah, it all came reading the script. We had done $6 million Man at 12 inches. G.I. Joe was 12 inches. Big Jim had been 6 inches and stuff like that. But when you read the script, when I read the script, what do I want to do with my what do I want to do with this? At the time I was 27, I'd go back and think, I'm a 7-year-old. What do I see this adventure. What do I want to do? And I want to do the dog fights and blow up the Death Star and stuff. And you can't do that with a 12-inch figure. So I went out now there's a couple of stories. One is that Bernie Loomis put his fingers up and said, make them this big. The other story is that I went in search of a figure I could use to mock the first ones up, and adventure people were already there. And this guy is 3 3/4 inches tall. So somewhere between those two, between Bernie Loomis's figures and the ones that I went out and purchased, is what happened. It was I needed a figure that was articulated. I could put in the next wing in the TIE fighter, and they were at hand. So I got out my X-Acto knives and my body putty, and I made the first figures out of that. And David gave up his sock. I didn't have to do that. I didn't wear brown socks anyway.
So, Jim, was the C-3PO part of the original presentation in Los Angeles to Kenner? I know that you said that it was created physically in a different way. It was a subtractive process. Were all 11 of those figures ready to present in person? They were tactile. They could see them, touch them.
No, well, the 20th Century Fox presentation was with the adventure people that were hacked up, because that's what we sold them on. We used all the production sculpture that was done happened after May.
Oh, so the original presentation was the drawings, the artwork.
Drawings and mock-ups, yeah. It was not. We didn't have any. It took. I'm trying to think. I'd have to talk to one of the sculptors. It took once we didn't turn anything over until May to production people.
I feel like I saw a photo recently. I was doing some looking around this weekend, and I feel like I saw a photo where the mock-ups that you did, to present the physical mock-ups, that maybe C-3PO was presented as a design or a drawing. Maybe it was just the shot that I saw. But it made me curious.
Yeah, there's some photographs that don't have the three-dimensional sculpture that I did, and I'm not sure where but they were still, the very first C-3PO mock-up was done on an adventure person, the adventure people. And none of the sculpture that made it to production happened until we actually turned product over. And that was kind of mid-May. We started, once the movie had been previewed, there's a preview that I went to in May, on the 1st of May, and then the second was the press review on the 2nd of May. Once that started happening, the Time magazine came out, and there's a lot of PR. Then it would, and Kenner had been negotiating the deal, so about end of April, 1st of May, things started opening up at Kenner, and all the negotiations were still going on.
So I have a follow-up question about that, because it sounds like the time frame obviously was one of the big major issues with the other toy companies who passed, and understandably so. There was already a blueprint, so to speak, of how things can be designed and produced and what was realistic in terms of timelines. How did the agreement or the unwritten agreement go between Lucasfilms and Kenner during that period? Was it just a matter of, hey, if we've got a toy company that's willing to do it and the toy company wants it, we just kind of all understand no matter what we do, it's going to take some period of time, and when they're ready, and we'll do the best we can? They knew it was going to be way after the movie, I assume.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, everybody knew. The negotiations were all done by marketing and our lawyer, Jim Kipling. So they were taking a leap of faith in April, May that we were going to go ahead and do this because we were investing time and money into it. But the deal points and all that stuff hadn't been settled. So it was a matter of people, the lawyers, going together and saying, okay, how much are we going to pay for this, and what's up front, and what are the percentages? And because they were kind of behind the 8 ball, and we were kind of their last resort, they really had gone through every other major toy company, and it was 20th Century taking a leap of faith that we could do it, and the Kenner managers saying, well, we'll do it even though we know we're taking a big risk. I mean, at the time, I think it was $50,000 or something. It was relatively small, but 1977, those were still pretty big numbers. And for a toy line that we could, so far, up until May, they'd only invested my time and some model makers and engineers looking at stuff. So they hadn't spent a lot of money on it yet, but they were going to. I mean, and then, when I came back and told people just how incredible the movie was, they got real serious. They got much more serious about it. So, and Bernie was he was a brilliant negotiator, and we got galactic rights forever. So. Until
and the reality is Kenner didn't really have to wait very long to wonder if this was going to be a success or not, because it was a very short period between when you were mocking up figures and when the movie came out and was the biggest movie in the world, right?
Yeah. But you were still keeping our fingers crossed. I mean, everybody was like, well, I hope we're, but, I didn't have to worry about that. I just had to have fun. So I had a great time. I had the best design position in the world at that time because I was doing stuff all by myself. I was like, I was, until they actually assigned a marketing person to the thing, I was the liaison between Lucasfilm, and I was writing letters back, we had letters, faxes. We'd send faxes. But I got to, sending notes to Ben Burt and saying, I need these sound effects, and Charlie Lippincott and Kara Wakarska, now Titleman. I was the guy doing all this, making up lists of, let's do all. I have a copy of my memo of all the characters that we could potentially do that I turned over with the turnover stuff. So I got to do it all. I got, these old, if you go to you see an old movie about Hollywood studios and stuff. I got to drive to Universal Studio and go up to the guy with a clipboard and, say, I'm here to see Charlie Lippincott in Lucasfilm, and he's like looking down, as his clipboard, and he says, oh yeah, right here, and you can park your car over there, and they're in Bungalow, whatever it was. And so I got to do all the great stuff. I've had, I've met George Lucas and a whole bunch of the other people, so I had a great time.
Jim, do you pay attention to any of the resale prices going on those figures?
One of them, I sold a rocket firing Boba Fett for $18,000.
Wow.
I don't know. It's probably 20 years ago. And I did notice that one sold for $168,000 not very long ago. And I was like, damn, I should have kept that figure. And I gave one away. I gave one to a friend who I think sold it for $100,000. But he owes me a finder's fee, but he hasn't done it. He hasn't come up with it yet. So
That wasn't the guy on Pawn Stars, was it, that was selling that?
No. This is a real one. I don't know about that other one.
Do you wish that you would have kept like 100 vinyl Cape Jawas from 40 years ago and you could have sold them all now?
Yeah, I think I sold my mother's for a song. I gave my mother a sample of every product I had my hands on. So
wow.
She had an X-wing. She had an X-wing and a TIE fighter. She had all the figures, the first figures, and anything else. She got a sample of everything. So I've only managed to keep one or two, the X-wing and TIE fighter, but everything else, in 40 years, there are too many birthdays and holidays and, kids, people have kids. I don't have kids. So it's like, well, what am I going to do with this stuff? So
Get the Cape Jawa for your birthday. Here you go.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's probably like, oh, there's this Jawa. And I'm sure she had a vinyl caped one because she got the first stuff. So, yeah.
So, Jim, what would you do differently now with today's technology if you were to design those figures again? Would you design them at all any different?
Oh, well, yeah. If we had the technology that we have now, our figures were so primitive compared to what they do now. And if I had the price points they're allowed to have now, it's like, oh, we would joke when, we do a figure and there's, you count the paint operations, and every paint operation is, if you put it on the figure, it'd be a nickel, if you wanted eyebrows or, different color for the hair or something, it'd be a nickel. But if you got to the point where you look at the cost sheet and you say, well, you're a nickel over, and it's like, okay, well, we'll take out no more eyebrows. And the cost engineer will always come back and say, well, that saves you 3 cents. You got to do something else. And I was like, wait a minute, I put those on for a nickel and I only get 3 back. So, fighting that kind of stuff now that the number, I hate to think how many paint operations are on some of the newer figures. I mean, they're just phenomenal, and the articulation, our stiff leg guys, it's a whole different ball game than back in '77. So
I guess it's safe to say that Boba Fett was probably had the highest paint application or whatever at the time. Maybe I don't know. I'd have to count them. And
And you have to kind of balance that with C-3PO being vacuum metallized and then painted. You know, it's nickels and dimes and stuff. But, I mean, you had quite a few, most of them on the front. So, but now, and when I did Boba Fett, I only got involved in Boba Fett because it was going to be a top secret thing, and preliminary design was not a public. You couldn't just come into the preliminary design department. We didn't have people wandering around, so they wanted it kept close. So they brought it into preliminary design. That's why I did that figure. They didn't really need me to do it, except that in preliminary design you had to actually you had to be let in. You wouldn't just wander in. Whereas production design area was pretty open. You still had to have badges and all that stuff, but you wouldn't, enough. They didn't want, a lot of people seeing Boba Fett right at the beginning.
So after all the figures were out, what was your most and least favorite figure?
Well, C3, I have a special heart. I think C3PO is probably my favorite. He and R2D2. Least favorite, Death Star Commander, because I had nothing to do with him. He came more along way after. But but I C3PO and R2D2. I think since they're the characters that have been in every movie since the beginning.
Yeah.
Are they in Mandalorian? I don't know.
R2 is.
R2.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I seem to remember that. But they were in. They were kind of a constant in everything. So, and I like the figure. I like the C3PO. And
Jim, what's one figure that never made it into production that you wish you would have seen?
Well, none of mine. It took a long time to get Tarkin done. He would have been a better figure than the Death Star Commander. And for whatever reason, that was a market. I can always blame that on marketing. Because they took the list of characters, and they're the ones that picked the ones and said, let's do that. We need a 12th figure. Let's do that one. So I didn't have anything to do with those kind of decisions. That was all done after I turned everything over.
Jim, was there any thought to what we now refer to as army building? If it's a figure that's, a no-name figure, a species or something where you can, or a stormtrooper, where you can buy, 20 of them and you can recreate a scene, as a kid playing with them. Was there any thought to the fact that you had a sand person, a stormtrooper, a Jawa, and that, for the toy business, kids could buy, 5 of each of those and really, create a whole play set? Or was that just a happy coincidence?
More of a happy coincidence. Although, for a while I had a box full of stormtroopers because it really did make sense. We didn't have this facility to do different kinds of stormtroopers at the time. And at the time when we were doing it, when I was working on, there was only one kind of stormtrooper. But the army part of it, it was obviously you could collect lots of stormtroopers.
Yeah, somehow that logic didn't make it into my house. I had so many of the figures, but I had one stormtrooper, and it's just like, okay, so I've got 17 good guys fighting one stormtrooper.
Maybe it was the one that had actually a good shot, because most weren't. Yeah,
had to be.
More stormtroopers died. It's like, why did you clone all these guys if they can't shoot straight?
Jim, I did have one question for you about lightsabers. I don't know how easily you'll be able to answer it, but 3 of the original action figures had lightsabers, Darth Vader, Luke, and Obi-Wan. And they were hidden in the arms, which I'm assuming you planned that out so that it was like powering on a lightsaber for that action, for that motion. What can you tell us about what they at least now refer to as the double telescoping lightsaber, the lightsaber that actually had the inner part that extended. Did that came first, and then what was the reason moving over to it like a solid lightsaber? Was it just because it was too delicate, or what's the story there?
The lightsabers that I turned over, again, this is because it's conceptual, is that my first models, if there's some photographs, I think in Engineering the Empire, there's some photographs of the first models that got turned over. My original lightsaber, because we were looking for a way to make a lightsaber come out of the hilt. And my first lightsaber, we took the heaviest monofilament fishing line we could find. And the model makers cut a hole in the back of the figures and carved and drilled out the arm. And then we ran the monofilament down onto then there was a round reel in the middle of the back. So you would pull out the monofilament and then reel it back by turning the knob on the back of his back. That was the original concept. When it got turned over, that was it was probably pretty quickly discarded as being way too complicated and too expensive. So the engineers in production design and the designers came up with the telescoping thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the first ones, I mean, the first production with the double telescoping thing was a little clunky, but it worked. You know, kids didn't really care much about it. And we were designing toys after all, not collectibles. And but in reliability, that little telescoping part would, pretty easily, a kid just pulls it out, first or second time, they probably pulled it out too hard and it came off. So that's when they froze it, the doing the lightsaber with the step in it is all one piece was kind of clunky way to do it, but it was what they ended up with. So. And it wasn't my design, but my design wasn't very practical from a production standpoint to have a reel and monofilament and all that stuff. And plus monofilament, the way it's manufactured, it has a natural coil, it spins around. When you pull it, when you're manufacturing it, it has a natural, and we couldn't find a material that had a straight memory, so. Again, it was partially limited by the technology of the time. So, but the double telescoping was an interesting solution, but it wasn't very practical. Mm. And they didn't want to just they wanted it to come out of the handle, so they're out of the hilt. So they didn't want to just we could have more easily just had an extended lightsaber, and the kids probably would have liked that just as much.
So aside from the figures and the X-wing and the TIE fighter, what other like stuff, accessories did you contribute to as far as the production design and stuff like that? And see, Brandon.
There's one. The trapdoor in the back of the dewback and the tauntaun. That was my invention. So it was like we had stiff-legged figures. Oh, who signed that?
You signed it. There you go.
We had stiff-legged figures, and we wanted them to ride the dewback. So that was where that came from. And I did the layout drawings for the first Death Star playset.
Jim, I just have to interrupt and make sure you know that since we met you in person in April at the ICC con, John has been going around talking about for months how you stuck your finger in his trapdoor dewback, and he still has it, and it's his prized possession. And
I still have it.
Jim Swearingen, he manhandled my dewback, and I'm never getting rid of it.
I have it on video.
I hope I didn't leave any DNA there. So. I need to see
an autograph and DNA. I didn't even think about that. No, that's going to definitely.
I'm glad to do it. And I feel better about signing those than other things I've been asked to sign. So.
Oh, do tell.
What's the worst thing you've I don't want to say had to sign, but you've been asked to sign?
I probably some knockoff stuff that I don't like to do that kind of stuff. It's like acknowledging. I mean, all the knockoff things that people have, but no.
Do you feel comfortable turning that down or asking if they would mind? You sign something else, or is that just uncomfortable all around?
Yeah, it's just uncomfortable. I think the only thing I've actually refused to sign. I was in Mexico City at a show there, and a fella came up to my table and had a Lily Letty figure. I don't know what it was. And it was a little beat up and stuff. It was in the package and it was a little beat up. And he wanted me to sign it. And I explained through my interpreter, I said, I can't sign this. I said, you need to take this to some of these, there were vendors there. And I said, you need to show this to some people here that know a lot about toy collecting and stuff, because there were some there. And I said, if I sign this, I'm afraid that I will devalue it for you because I would sign it. So I gave him an 8x10, but I wasn't going to sign his thing because it was a Lily Letty something. And I'm not a collector, but I do know that Lily Letty stuff is more valuable than some other things. Right. And to have one in the package and stuff, I said, please go do some research before you ask me to sign it again. So I think that's one of the few things that I've actually said, sorry, I can't do that. I can't. All I have to do is sign it, and it's it's $1,000 figure, and I just signed it, and it's like it's not worth anything. My conscience would be really. I'd be really unhappy with that happening. So.
Jim, when I think back of my childhood, I don't really think of the Star Wars movies itself. I really think about playing with the figures. Do you realize how much of an impact that has made on pretty much all kids' lives growing up?
That's what I've heard.
It's
no,
true.
No, well, and I think that's amazing. I think I get the biggest kick out of a dad or grandfather with a son and maybe it's a son or a daughter, and then a granddaughter or grandson coming around the shows and stuff and talking to me. Because it's such a multi-generational thing, that's that part of it is really it's really exciting for me to think that I had an influence on those people and that they had a lot of fun and they're having fun together as a family. So I get the biggest kick out of those people and meeting all the collectors.
I have a 2-year-old son at home, and I'm not really rushing to show him Star Wars movies. But you can sure bet he has held every one of your Star Wars figures and played.
Not all the ones that are behind you, though.
Not the ones behind me.
He's not allowed in that room.
Those are off limits.
It's like you can touch those, but if you go in there, you're going to lose an arm. No, I get it's really humbling to hear how many people say you made my childhood, because it was great fun. I tell you, I'm in awe of collectors. I've seen incredible collections. I'm blown away by what people have done, collecting things, and I enjoy seeing everybody that has fun with it. And hopefully kids are still playing with some of them. I mean, the idea of buying two, I ran into somebody whose dad he's probably in his 50s, maybe mid 40s, somewhere in the 50s. And so he was a kid when he was playing with Star Wars. And he had the foresight to buy 2 of everything way back. And so one was for playing with and one was put away. And then his son had inherited all this stuff that his dad had collected all these things in packages. And then he had all these other things that he could play with. So it was like, wow. There's a lot of people like me that wish they had held on to a lot more stuff.
And now there's a lot of collectors who were kids at that time who now are buying the stuff for themselves. So the running joke is buy one to open and play with, buy one to keep as a collection, and buy a third one, just in case. We have the ability to do that, and we wish, we did that when we were kids or our parents did that.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. This is the only toy line that has had that kind of longevity. Maybe Hot Wheels, but it's not the same. It's like, but yeah, it still amazes me that it goes on, and I'm amazed that people come to see me and talk to me about stuff. I got to kick it off, but I didn't stay with it very long. I only worked on Star Wars for the first 2 movies, and due to
why was that?
Due to management change, Dave Okada left. He and Vernon Loomis left Kenner and went off to form marketing and design services for the General Mills Fun Group. So he left, and they decided to move somebody into his position, and he hired a guy I couldn't work with, and I decided that I needed to change, and I started looking around, and when people in marketing found out I was looking around and that I had talked to Mattel, they decided that maybe they wanted to keep me around, so they offered me a job in product management. So I went into marketing. I went into the dark side. So I went into marketing in 1980. I took over Strawberry Shortcake.
Jim, I was telling my wife earlier today at lunch that I remembered you saying after you worked on Star Wars, you went to Strawberry Shortcake, and she got all perked up and excited. And she said, "Oh, you have to tell him I had the strawberry case that you open up with other figures in it, and it smelled like strawberry." She was very excited, but it was interesting, just the concept that working in that field, you can be a part of things. You can be touching things that are a part of every kid's life, girls, boys, all different interests. So it was funny to see her perk up when I said that.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I had Strawberry Shortcake and I go, way back. I became very fluent in berry talk. I wrote a lot of copy with the word berry in it. When I go downtown to see have you all been to Cincinnati?
No. It's been a while since I've been to Cincinnati.
If you come to Cincinnati, you've probably seen the mural.
Yes.
Kenner. Okay. So if you come to town, I touched about easily 75% of those product lines.
Wow.
So yeah, that's awesome.
I had lots of great experience. So, it's from Sit and Spin and Spirograph to Star Wars, and and there's a lot of Star Wars up there. It's pretty, there's a Boba Fett and X-Wing fighter and stuff. So the toy business, the good thing about, one of the things that attracted me to the toy business, because it's kind of like, well, you're an industrial designer. Do you want to work on toasters or, stereo equipment or something? The toy business changed all the time. So, one year you're working on Star Wars, and the next season you're working on Strawberry Shortcake. So it was like 50% of every toy line changes every year. So you're always looking for new ideas and stuff, although maybe not as much these days, because you're rehashing a lot of stuff. But that was what really attracted me, is that, I could do a lot of other industrial designy things, cars and stuff. I one of my co-op sections was with General Motors. I worked in the car interior group there for the summer. But it's not nearly as exciting because, you know, how many times can you change a taillight or, you know, which, you know. So the toy business is really radically new every year. There used to be. It's a little hard to tell now, but because, you know, Kenner went through so many, you know, it's Batman and Ghostbusters and all that stuff. Those lots of stuff changed all the time. There's always, in order to get salespeople or buyers into the showroom, you had to have something new to show them. So it was always really exciting.
Nowadays, all we see is remakes of pretty much everything. You know, He-Man, Batman, Scooby-Doo, Star Wars, everything. Everything's just a remake nowadays. There's nothing original. I don't see hardly any figures from any TV shows or movies that are out right now.
No. Well, that's because there's so few people to sell to. I mean, there are no toy, you know. You look at when you're only dealing with Target, Amazon, and Walmart, you really don't have very many. I mean, Walmart says, I'll take that and that, but I'm not taking that third thing. You're not going to show them much. So now, I was involved just recently, a couple of years ago, trying to help a Chinese manufacturer break into the toy business in America. They wanted to do their own toy line in America. So my business partner, ex-business partner, Tom, and Dave Maurer, who was president of Kenner at one point, we got together and tried to help them break into the market. And it is just incredible. It's like the business has just completely changed. So, and I think kids are suffering from it because there's not much fun out there. There's some doll stuff that's kind of cute and funny, but you know, no one today would come up something as big as Baby Alive now. You know, that just doesn't happen. It's really tough, and little toy companies come and go really quickly. Like ours, we put together this thing called Hooray Toys. We had a big toy line that we'd put together. It was pretty interesting. They were doing a movie. They had funded a movie and all that stuff. So we had a lot of stuff that we could have done with it, but it fizzled really quickly. So it's not. I wouldn't want to be starting up a toy company right now.
Yeah. Do you think that technology and stuff like that has a lot to do with the interest in play?
Oh yeah. I mean, kids are on their tablets.
Yeah.
But to figure out a way to go from a tablet to a toy, you can, go on your, and it's probably coming, go on your computer and design your favorite character, and then you'd be able to, 3D print it, and it's just around the corner.
Yeah.
Because people are, and you can do 3D printing in multiple colors. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we were just fortunate enough, the group of the five of us, being all invested in the same hobby, we were just fortunate enough to grow up in the golden age of toys. I think, like you've spoken about many times, the toy industry really changed going into the late 70s and 80s, and we all have younger kids, and with the screens and the tablets and everything, the internet and everything that they can be distracted by, it's really hard to get them to sit down and play with toys. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. They have a full set of all the Star Wars toys. They have vehicles and stuff, and they do play with them, but they don't have a lot of invested interest in the current current modern toys the way that we did. We didn't have a lot of divided attention. We would sit for hours and hours and play with these toys.
Yeah. Well, it's just, that's the way things are going. So I don't know. Because trying to think the first video game thing that we had, Pong or something. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of time that, you'll probably have to invest in a 3D printer.
That's a really good point that you just brought up, and I hadn't really considered that, because around the time when Star Wars toys started to dip, and I know that you had moved on already, but around that 85, 86 period, I'm remembering back that's when I got my first Nintendo, and that was my first video game system. So that might have been a big shift in the toy industry too, is a lot of kids sitting there in front of a TV with, being occupied for hours on end, as opposed to, having to physically play with toys. That's an interesting thought. That was the beginning of the end.
The 1995 Kenner Star Wars toys that were, I don't know what you think about those, Jim, but those are disappointing to a lot of us, I think.
I'm trying to think. What's 95? Is that the
Power of
the Force?
Power of the Force 2
Incredible Hulk meets Star Wars?
Yeah,
exactly.
Who is it? Somebody just recently. I know. It was one of the collectors, FJ. He had on Facebook, he had a picture of his, because it was Mark Hamill's birthday. He had his original, he has a New Hope one, and he's got the 95 Powers of the Force, and they're both signed by Mark Hamill. And I said something about those are the weirdest figures. And he said, yeah, when I had them signed, because he had them signed at the same time, Mark Hamill picked up the Power of the Force one and said something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but so he's at a signing and he's like, holds us up and he's like, look at it. It was just like putting that Power of the Force thing down. It just was funny to read that, even Mark Hamill didn't like seeing himself that way.
Well, getting them signed by Mark Hamill, I think, is the only way to have any value at this point.
yeah.
Maybe so. That I guess at the time that seemed like a good idea.
Jim, I do have an oddball question for you that I had thought of earlier. You worked on developing the Death Star playset and creating that, and I've heard you speak about that before. One question I had for you was the trash monster, which somehow is called Dianaga. Was that part of that? And my fascination with that is, as a kid watching that movie over and over again, and that eyeball pops out of the water, I always just imagined it being some kind of a snake creature, or it had a tentacle, or it was using its tail. How did it turn into that Loch Ness monster looking figure? Were you part of that? Do you remember?
Well, I don't remember if I turned over a monster with it. I know who designed that monster.
Okay.
I can tell you who it was.
All right.
It was my it was my former business partner who was working in production design. It was Tim Effler. So he designed the monster that was in the playset. So
I wonder if he was working off of a production design, or
no. All they had was the picture and the eyeball. So it was like from there down, it was really up to the people at Kenner.
See, that's what I wanted to know. That's what I found so fascinating, that somebody just created that. Yeah.
And I don't, hard to tell. It was somewhere in the process, it would have been passed by Lucasfilm marketing, and it's hard to tell whether they actually, had somebody. I'd be hard pressed to tell you whether Lucas actually saw it or not. And they never, as far as I know, none of the people at Lucasfilm had actually designed the creature. I mean, if there were drawings or something, but I don't think that existed. So, but it was Tim. It was his fault.
I bet that's happened. I bet that happens in the toy industry a bunch. And I can think of another example with Star Wars later on with Return of the Jedi. I've read articles about this. The Max Rebo guy, the blue guy who would play the piano in Jabba's palace, was really supposed to be like this stumpy short thing with no legs. And from the photos that they created the toy from years later, they couldn't tell that it wasn't sitting inside the piano. It was sitting on top, and it was half the size. And they created a toy that, had, hips and legs and feet. And it's just a very interesting story that they had to create a toy out of whatever they could imagine the photo was.
It worked.
It worked. Yeah.
Simon Williamson is very happy to have a figure. The guy that was the puppeteer. Those guys are really interesting. I've met a bunch of the puppeteers, the people that did Jabba the Hutt and all that stuff. There were 5 guys inside Jabba the Hutt, plus some guys outside. It was really fun to meet them.
So what is it like when you go to these cons? Just
Are you going?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you going to next year's con?
ICC?
Yeah.
Well, if Michael invites me to come back, I'll go back. I'll probably come. It's I'm, as I said, I'm trying to put together some panels of my, that I'm not in that business, but there's some people that are like Tom Clark, the marketing guy that was there this year.
Mm-hmm.
I introduced him to Michael, and I'm trying to put together a couple others that might be interesting for collectors to talk to, like the sculptors and Kim Simmons is, he's interesting to talk to. There's some other people. We're unfortunately dying off. I did this. If you saw my presentation, I don't know if you noticed when there's a photograph in the presentation that's of the team, the prelim team, and there's, I don't know how many people were actually there, but I turned, I'm doing my talk, and I've done it enough times but I'd added that slide and a couple other ones. So I turned, and I hadn't done a presentation with that slide in there. And when I turned to see what I was, because I didn't have they didn't have a monitor I could see, so I had to look back to see what the photograph was. I turned, and it took a little bit of my breath away when I saw that, because half those people were dead. It was just like, I turned, and it was like, it just, for some reason, it struck me that, all the engineers, one engineer left, all the model makers that did some incredible work early on are all gone. It was just like, whoa, that's just just a breathtaking moment for us. Just a second, it was like, oh yeah. Still have to tell people what's going on here. But what was the question? Sorry, I think I went off on a tangent.
Well, I think we're saying we're putting a call out to Michael Havens, right? We want to have you back next year. He did a great job at the convention last year. We had a great time, and the 5 of us, that's where we all met in person, and we've been inseparable on a daily conversation basis ever since. So we hope we'll see you back there next year.
Well, it's on my schedule. I don't have very many dates set up this year. For obvious reasons. I'm going to be in Louisiana the 9th of October, and then I don't have anything scheduled, because I was hoping, fingers crossed, I was hoping to go to Cologne, Germany for a Star Wars thing, Power of the Force, I think was the name of it. But they didn't want to, they kind of pulled back and said maybe next year, because they didn't want to buy tickets and all that, and then have COVID shut things down, which is probably what's happening right now. But and then the next thing I have is in Austin, Texas. So if you know anybody near Austin, Texas, I'm going to be at the Shroud. It's called the Shroud Con. It's a group of Mandalorian cosplayers. They're putting together a con in Austin, Texas on the January 20th and 21st. So if you know anybody that in that area.
I think we know a bunch of collectors in Texas and in that area, and I'm sure we have some listeners as well.
Yeah.
Jim, how did you get started with the conventions? How did that come about after years, away from Star Wars in your life? And how did that feel when you started? Was it an odd, unfamiliar setting to walk into? What was that like for you?
My first con was called the Unboxing Toy Convention in Mexico City. the guy that runs it had seen Plastic Galaxy, and he reached out to me and said, "Would you come to Mexico?" So that was the first one. And then I did his show twice in between the Toys That Made Us came out. But they did a great thing with everything. I had an interpreter with me all the time, and they did a great job. It was that, but that was the first. And then I got a contact from a group that was doing Indianapolis and Florida. I can't remember, Pensacon. I haven't done a lot of them. I mean, I'm kind of an odd character to come to shows. It's like, I'm not an actor. I'm not a voice actor. I'm a toy designer. So it's kind of
You designed everybody's fantasy Star Wars world, though.
And I have an agent now that gets me some conventions. And the best, and then I got invited. I think after Mexico City, I got an invitation to go to a thing called Norse Force in Nuremberg, wow, which is coming up next year. If you want to see it's kind of a smaller version of the Celebration, and I think it's in October. It's called Norse Force. I don't know what number it is. It's all Star Wars. It's only Star Wars.
So you're a Star Wars fan at heart, even if you're not, a collector per se of memorabilia and things like that. I know you have some stuff, and you should probably have some really cool stuff. But as a Star Wars fan at heart, what was it like to walk into some of these conventions and see fans that are just so passionate and are willing to, dress up or just want to talk nonstop about it? What was that experience like? Was that really did it make you step back because it just was something so new to you?
Yeah, I go, this is all because of me, which to some extent is. I mean, if Kenner hadn't stepped in, it might have been another Mego line that came and went, and, was gone in 1978. But going in cons, it's just, it's a real ego rush too. I mean, people, when I walked through Celebration in Chicago, when I walked through there, people would, I did a panel, but that was kind of like spur of the moment where you come and sit on the panel for Gus Lopez's thing. But I walk around and people ask for my autograph or photographs and stuff. It's pretty heady stuff. It's like, because a lot of people saw the Toys That Made Us and recognized me walking around just, looking at toys and stuff. That's how the guys from the Austin show, they were both dressed in their Mandalorian things, and they're both 6-something tall, and I come up to their shoulder, so they asked for my photograph, and I said, sure, I'll take a photograph. So that was in Chicago, and then they said they were thinking about doing their con of their own, and I said, well, let me know. So but yeah, I get a little bit of a rush out of it. It's because I got a little smarter last Celebration. I had cards. I have a card. Gary Bobridge, do you know him? He's Engineering the Empire. He was one of the authors of Empire. Anyway, he named me the Toy Father. So I have a logo. It's I don't think I have one handy. Anyway, it's the Godfather hand, the one with the strings hanging down, and instead of a dead body, it's an X-wing fighter. So
that's good.
The Toy Father.
That's great.
So I have a card like that with my picture on it and stuff. And so people ask for my photograph. On the back of it, I printed, it says, I asked them to consider making a donation to hydrocephalus, because that's my charity. So I have a 8-year-old guy that has hydrocephalus and all that stuff. So I read that. So when people ask me for a photograph, instead of saying, well, give me $20 and you're going to have a picture, I just give them the card and say, ask them to make a donation. So
That's great. That's really nice.
Yeah, it's really, and when I do my signings and stuff, half that money goes to a charity, either hydrocephalus, or if the event has their own, I usually give money, give half the proceeds to them. In Norse Force, they were raising money for a thing similar to our Ronald McDonald House thing. They were raising money for the Children's Hospital in Nuremberg. So I donated a couple of my prints and half of my signing stuff. And I think I left 2,500 euros back there. So
Wow.
that part of it's really, that part I get it, you know, that's part of the reason I sit there for hours and hours and sign autographs, because I, you know, paying back to all the kids that suffer from different things. Hydrocephalus just happens to be one I'm closer to than a lot of other things. So.
Yeah, that's very generous of you. That's amazing that you do that. So, well, we don't want to keep you any longer than we have to, but we could talk to you for hours, honestly. I mean, I don't, you know. So I think, does anyone have any parting questions before we let Mr. Swearingen off the hook?
I don't feel like I'm on the hook.
Okay, good.
I'll just say I just want to personally thank you for coming. I know I spoke with you in person, and I don't know that, you know, I know that you don't remember that, but I was happy that I was able to thank you for your contributions in person in April when I met you, and just thanks very much for coming to our show. It's a newer show. This is, I think, our 8th episode or 9th episode. So just thanks so much for spending time with us. You're very generous with your time tonight, and thanks for sharing these great stories and answering our questions. We really appreciate it.
Great. Well, I really do enjoy talking to collectors. I don't get it because I don't collect, but it really is. I mean, you know, what's this, Prune Productions?
Oh, here we go. You're gonna have to explain that one, Chris.
His favorite figure is Prune Face from Return of the Jedi. No one else's favorite figure in the world except for Christopher.
Yeah.
That's Prune Face.
He was in the background of one scene for half of a second.
He was New Hope. He was the one that saved Princess Leia from the Death Star.
Oh my
False. False.
In some kind of fan fiction.
He was in Return of the Jedi.
Oh.
A scene that nobody really saw, but they made the figure anyway. Don't really know why.
I got it. Oh, that's terrible. I should know those. I did, as I say, I don't.
In the scene where they're planning to attack the Death Star in Return of the Jedi, he's just sitting on a bench in the background. That's it. And he's got a pirate patch. We don't know why. And somebody melted his face. I mean, Christopher has 1,700 of them.
Well, the truth is that for the last 40 years, people thought he was actually like a bad guy. They thought he was a bad figure, and people are starting to realize now that he's actually a good guy.
Well, so he was
Christopher's going to be a millionaire soon, very soon.
Yes.
God. So we've had about 7 or 8 episodes, and he says this every single episode. And it's not that no one knew about that. No one really cared if he was or he wasn't.
Well, I was going to compliment him on his displays, and instead of his name, it says Prune Productions. So now I don't remember his name.
Well, everything behind him, there's 3 Luke Skywalkers, and every other one is filled with Prune Face. Can't tell.
It's an easier figure. It's like you can. There are people that concentrate on figures. Like now, a guy here in Cincinnati does Admiral Akbar.
Oh, that's a good one.
There are other people that collect. They concentrate on one figure, and that's
forgetting about Prune Face. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for making the toys, for us kids growing up, because as I said, that's what I remember the most. It's playing with the toys. It's not even the movies. It was the toys. So
that's good for me, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it's yeah. You're now the other. I've got two collectors, and then there's a little tiny thing, a shelf over here on John's. And
that goes around my room.
Rancor monster above.
He's
Charles.
eating Lobot, the worst figure. Is Lobot.
Yeah, it's the worst.
Lobot? Oh yeah, by far.
Yeah, Charles has like a deep distaste of Lobot.
Oh, it's an easy cause character. You know, if you want to do cosplay, it's easy. You just set some headphones and.
Yeah, you just have to wear a puffy shirt. We saw somebody dressed up at the ICC con. He was cosplaying Lobot.
Really?
And Charles was really jealous.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. I just want to say thanks again for coming on and for doing everything you've done for the past 40 some odd years with the toys and the conventions and meeting everybody, and like everybody else, thanks. I never thought I would meet the person that designed the toys that I was playing with a long time ago. So thank you for everything that you've done for the community and all the Star Wars fans and the generations to come.
And still playing with.
Yeah, and not just Star Wars. We all had Spirograph and Play-Doh and all those other toys too. I mean, you probably touched a lot of the design for a lot of the stuff that we played with. So very, very cool.
None of you are in the Strawberry Shortcake.
And Strawberry Shortcake.
Nobody. You don't collect Strawberry Shortcake.
No.
My sister had them. My younger sister had them, so they were in the house.
Wow.
Yeah, and
I still remember the smell of them.
I'm sure you inspired a lot of designers too with the Spirograph.
Oh, maybe, I don't know. This is the most frustrating toy in the world. But we had, it's like how, because the only thing they've actually really sold is the basic set, where you make all this stuff. And we were trying to come up with how can you do it? We had Spirograph trying to make them 3D, and how do you, frustrating for a designer because it's like, what can you do with this stuff? Yeah, I had a great time. I have many fond memories of the stuff that I worked on, and it's really fun to see people still playing with them. People that work on, still have Strawberry Shortcake and they still smell. So
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, Star Wars is definitely. I tell you, I had the best time in the world because I got into it at a point where I could almost do anything I wanted to. I got to meet everybody, and now I get to meet the actors behind the characters. It's fun. I've got. I'm still on Facebook, and everybody's you do Facebook, but it's a way of keeping up with like the actors, all the background characters, the people that play Jabba the Hutt, and all the puppeteers and stuff are great. They're great fun to talk to. I'm trying to think who was. I don't think that any of them were ICC. They've been there because they couldn't come over this year, like Yak Face and
COVID and stuff.
The Squid Face and stuff. He was there a year before. He and I are great fun. We're great friends. Pam Rose, who was. I can't remember the character's name, but there's all these characters that I've met. They're great fun, and we're now familiar enough that it's like we pass information around, talk to one another online. I love that part of it. The big wigs, none of the big guys.
Well, it sounds like it's a win. It sounds like it's a win-win. A couple times a year, you get to walk around like a rock star for the weekend, and you get to meet some nice people and make some good friendships, as well as some kooky fans and some nice fans, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Norse Force, the first Norse Force I went to, that's the only one. At Norse Force, if you ever get over there, they do an incredible job. They have a stage setup that has the doors, whatever. So when you make a presentation, the doors are closed, blast doors.
Okay.
And they're on their remote control, so you stand behind it, and then they introduce you, and the thing opens up, and you step over the threshold onto the stage, and then the doors close. It's really cool. It was just like, this is great. So it's like,
John, can we Photoshop any doors when we edit this so that when we introduce Jim, the doors open? Maybe we can work on that. It's a good idea.
That was just it. It was that was the best presentation thing. It was like, the blast doors open. It's the whole stage. It's this big stage and stuff. It was really cool. And I get to do all that stuff, which is really a lot of fun now. But early on, it was great to be involved with George and all that stuff. So. Anyway,
well, again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for spending your Sunday night with us. You didn't have to, and you were very gracious to accept our invitation. So we do really appreciate that. Please, everyone, like this video, share this video with your friends, your fellow collectors. Please subscribe to our channel and just join us in commenting and thanking Jim Swearingen for joining us today. John, anything else you'd like to add as we wrap it up?
No, I just want to say that it really has been a real treat to have Jim Swearingen on with us tonight, and again, we appreciate you joining us. And I want to also remind viewers that if you want to leave some comments and some ideas for future guests or future spotlights, so we can see what you guys want down the road. As far as we're thinking about, I think we talked about it last week. We're thinking about doing like a collector's corner every week. So if you're interested and you have a nice collection, or even a small collection, it's fine. Just talk about collecting and what it means to you. And again, Jim, thanks so much for joining us. And everyone, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Jim. Have a good night.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Thanks, Jim.